Because it ran over late in the main room, we've had our time chopped from 50 minutes, from an hour to 50 minutes, which means that I have to talk even faster than I normally would do. Okay, so what we're going to do is just crack on and fly through. If you've got any questions at all, just shout, just say. On your chairs, every other one of you has got a small Pebblebeach pad. The idea is to get you so insanely jealous of your neighbour that you want more, you have to come first of all. Yeah. There is also a little contact thing for you if you want to join us on our newsletter. We just talk about fundraising stuff, what's happening in the world, the Pebblebeach dogs. To be fair, about 80% of the content is Pebblebeach dogs. So if you'd like to sign up, that's fine. And also, I'm going to be talking about some hospices. I know at least one of you are in the room today. So if your hospice is mentioned, I'd like a woo or a some kind of noise that makes me understand that you're in the room, okay? Everyone happy? Yeah, right, we're going to go, crack on if anyone's late. This is right, where are we? 36. So we've got 50 minutes. So that gets us to 25 past. Is that? Yeah? That's 25 past. Right, so been asked by NAHF to come and talk about various subjects. Quite often in conferences to talk about individual giving. We're doing something on capital appeal fundraising this time. And it's a subject that we're talking about a lot. We're working with a lot of different hospices and capital appeals. It's a big thing. And I wanted to talk about this, and the way I've ended up doing it is kind of 9-point plan for success, which sounds really posh, doesn't it? Like it's all you've got to do is 9 points. But actually, it's about whittling it down. So what you're getting is, over the last 12 years, we've been involved in over a dozen hospice capital build projects. Some we've been heavily involved in a leadership management role. Other times we've just delivered a bit of materials for them. That's all we've done. But we've seen a lot of different experiences and worked on a lot. So this is a download from our experience of that. Any questions as we go through? Shout. No wrong answers. We're all friends here. And the first thing, one thing I wanted to start by saying is, the chief executive of Barnabas in Worthing, indeed. So Hugh, before he left, remember one famously, when I was there in 2006, he was showing someone around, he said, well, of course, clinical, it's extremely important because we only ever get one chance to get end-of-life care right. And so we've got to do it right. And that's the pressure on your clinical colleagues the entire time. They get one chance to make the right decisions in the right way at the right time to deliver the right care. Capital fundraising is your equivalent of that. You get one chance to get this stuff right. And so what I want to talk about is 9 points that I think are essential for giving yourself the best chance of success, not guaranteeing success, because there are no guarantees in what we do, but giving yourself the best chance for success, okay? So the first 3 out of the 9 are actually things that you need from your organisations. The first thing you need is vision. All these pictures of Brighton, by the way, that some of us have taken over very quickly time. So the first thing you need is vision. You need to know, before you launch Capital Hill, what are you doing? What is the objective, clinically, that your organisation is trying to achieve? And there have been several occasions where we sat there going, well, we're going to build a new hospice. Brilliant. Why? Because the trustees thought it was a good idea. That's not enough. You need to know, as fundraisers, because you are a sales force and you're about to go out into your community and sell something, you need to know what you're selling. What is the point of this? So the first thing you need to know is, what is the need? What is the clinical need in our community? And having identified the clinical need, what are the elements that define the delivery of that clinical need? So for example, we know that there is a spike in population around the baby boom generation at the moment, and over the next 20 years, the number of people that will turn to the hospices and require care will increase. Right, how is your hospice going to achieve that? That's often the driving force behind a lot of the clinical development stuff that's going on at the moment. Also, people living longer, so people arriving at the IPU with comorbidities, so you're looking after patients not only with an oncology diagnosis, but a dementia diagnosis at the same time. So there's stuff happening, stuff changing. So what is the clinical need, and what is the clinical solution to that need? And can your team, your clinical colleagues, your medical director, your clinical director, can they define that? Can they say, we have looked at the future, and as far as it's possible to tell, we expect the calls on our service to increase by this much complexity, and we have identified that the solution to that is this many buildings, this many people, and this many interactions. Because once they've done that, then you have a cogent argument that you can go out to the public and you can go and talk to. But if you don't know why you're building something or creating something, then how can you go and sell it? How do you actually have that conversation? Quite often, we've been involved in the first conversations about capital build. And we've gone in, can you come and help us fundraise for capital build? And we walked in and go, yeah, brilliant, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm not really sure. Going out of business, not really sure why. And so part of our role as the fundraiser, and part of your role as well, if you are being asked to go and raise money for a capital, is to say, brilliant, fantastic, why? What's the need? Where's the evidence? Can we prove it? Because if you walk into someone and ask them for 10 quid for hospice care, you've got a good chance of getting 10 quid for hospice care. If you walk in and ask for 10 grand, you've got to prove it. Because you're up against a huge amount of competition and you need to know, you have a business case, you need to prove that. And the first evidence that you need is clinical need. What do you actually need to do as an organisation? I'll give you an example of each one. So, St Barnabas, Lincolnshire. He's not in the room, right, okay. So St Barnabas Links, we've just started working with these guys now, and we've known V and St Barnabas for quite a few years now. They're looking at the future of hospice care, and they're talking about buildings. And so we went and sat with them quite recently just before Christmas and said, okay, brilliant, what are you actually looking to do? Well, it's about different stuff happening with buildings, and they've got a huge catchment area. It's nearly 2.5 hours drive from north to south of their patch. They've got 14 different physical buildings as part of their portfolio. And it's a big thing. So we actually talked about them, and one thing we helped them to change to was, rather than focusing on we're creating this new building, what they're actually doing is creating a new level of service for their community. It's a new level of hospice care for Lincolnshire. And yes, that contains a brand new building, but actually it also contains a lifting of service for community and for hospice at home, and also there's some digital stuff going on as well. There might be some outreach as well. And that's all part of the package, because your IPU, and often we think about capital as buildings, yeah? We'll talk about this later. Capital doesn't have to just be buildings. Often it's about the building is just part of the solution to this new vision for the future of care that your clinical college developed for you. So when we sat down with these guys, it's not, their capital bill is not just going to be about a building, it's going to be about how do we care for Lincolnshire? Because some of their clients are farmers who live 2 miles up a farm track, and if they want to get the community nurse up there in the snow, brilliant, they've got a relationship with the young farmers. They get it on the back of the tractor, and they're up the farm track on the back of the tractor with the kid. Absolutely superb. So there's a conversation there that we've helped, again, helping to identify what the clinical vision is and what the narrative is. So that's the first thing that you need from your board of trustees and from your exec team. Second thing is cost. Do you know what this stuff's going to cost? Most often, hospices have a vague idea of what things are going to cost, but they don't actually fully understand it. They might not fully cost it. And in every single case, I promise you, in every single instance of hospice capital appeal that we've been involved in, the costs have been underestimated. It always costs more than they say it's going to cost. Have that tattooed on your trustees' foreheads, please, okay? It never just costs what they say it's going to cost, because stuff goes up, problems happen. So, again, the stupid thing around experience, they found badgers on site. That delayed the bill by 9 months, because you have to wait for badgers to have little badgers, and then you have to clear all the badgers away. And then you have to lay badger runs on the site, because otherwise they dig through your foundations. They found bat and owl takes a good 6 months. If you've got bats or owls, you have to wait to see if there are any bats or owls that will come and nest in the trees in the side here and here. They found Roman remains in one site. That required a team of archaeologists to go and do lots of digging, and there has to be a display case in the hospice saying, here's all the Roman stuff we found on the site. You've got to do all this stuff. Stuff happens, it all costs money. So do not believe them when they go, we're going to build this thing, it's going to cost 5 million. No, it's not. And do not accept that until you've got a fully quantified and itemised list of everything that's going to cost, and have you actually structured this in. Okay? And the example I'm going to give here, Thames Hospice. Okay. So Thames, in the Thames Valley, Ascot, Windsor, nice place to be fundraising. Not short of a penny round there. They wanted to build a new hospice, and they had a plan to build a £12 million new hospice. And part of our job there was the feasibility study, was go and say what's possible here. Now actually, one of the first conversations we had was about the clinical thing, have you had the vision, etc. And what we discovered was that clinical hadn't actually been given the opportunity to have a kind of, ooh, what could we have type session. They'd been told they could have the same floor space, square foot, as the existing hospice, just the new hospice, and that's it, because that's the cost. So when we actually said, hang on guys, you're building a brand new thing on a brand new site, you could have more. It's not going to cost that much difference. Then they went back to the plans. And anyway, we ended up with two options. One was 12 million, one was 16. And so, as we'll talk about later, we did the prospect research and talked to the great and the good. We identified a few key individuals. And we took the two options out to those individuals with the chief exec and director of fundraising. We said, look, here's the thing. We do need to build a brand new hospice. We can build a £12 million hospice, and that's great. Good hospice, nice. Or we can build a £16 million hospice, and that's fantastic. It's brilliant. But we have to fundraise this much to build a 12 million hospice, or we have to fundraise this much to build a 16 million hospice. And we confident we can do this, not confident we can do that. What do you think? We're going to need your help. And to a man, and they were all Thames Valley, old white men, most of them in Chelsea, who said, we don't do second best here, go for gold standard, we'll give you the support. And one of the guys that went to see actually wrote a check for him, he quit and sent it in the next week, so there you go, get you going. So that allowed that in particular hospice to go and have a greater ambition than they had originally thought and say, okay, actually, maybe we could do more than this. Because again, they're building a hospice. You get one chance to build the perfect hospice for your community. It's going to be there for the next 60, 70 years. You've got to get it right. So understanding the cost both in terms of, are we being pessimistic or optimistic, what's possible, but you can only do that once you've actually costed the project. And that means you've got to get solid figures from the architects and from the builders as well. And your architects will say, this is a project that will cost £2.4 million to build. And the builders will come in and go, yeah, it's 5 mil. So, hugely important. So, first two things, clinical vision, cost. You have to be given those to be able to go out and do your jobs properly. Third thing, the single biggest factor that will lead to the failure of a capital fundraising appeal is being told to do it too quickly. So, the example of the chief executive who went to the press and said, we're building a brand new hospice and we're going to be open in 2 years' time. No, you're not. You'd like to be, that's fantastic. Actually, in that particular instance, they hadn't started building 2 years later from that announcement. Giving yourself the right amount of time, or rather being allowed to have the time you need to go and do this successfully, is absolutely crucial. So if you are told, go and find £5 million and we want to be open in 18 months' time, you need to turn around to your growers and investors and go, sorry, but that timescale does not allow me to succeed, me and my team to succeed. And if they argue with you, you can send them to see me, okay? But those are the three things, out of the 9 points I wanted to mention, those are the three things that you have to be given. They are not in your control. What are you doing? And we don't touch clinical. We're not going to tell the clinicians what to do and whether you can have a if you want a hydrotherapy pool, okay, if we can afford a hydrotherapy pool, we'll get one for you. If we can't, we can't. But tell us what you need, tell us why you need it, justify it, give us some evidence, and then great, that's a narrative that we can go and use. Then, it's really hot in here, isn't it? Everyone hot? Yeah, right. If that's going to ruin your film, isn't it? But if we want to be giving ourselves the maximum opportunity to succeed on behalf of the organisation that's asking us to do it, we have a responsibility to go back and say, okay, we get one chance to do this. If you want me to succeed, I have to have these three things. I have to know what I'm doing, I have to know what it's going to cost, and I need the amount of time to be able to go and deliver it. Okay? All making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yo!
Quick question.
Hello.
In your experience, how much time as a minimum would it take? And I know,
There's
I
a piece of
say
string
as a
answer, you know
minimum,
this,
I know.
It depends. There's a particular project that we're just working on at the moment, just signed off, which is about 600,000, 2 years. However, that's actual fundraising time of 2 years. There have been other projects that have landed squillions in less time because there happens to be the money in there, and particularly when you've got a project that was started off with where the actual project became a thing because there was a big legacy that landed to start it off, that really, really helps. But it does depend, and it depends on the thing. So actually, wait to the end of it and then ask that again, because you'll kind of get right what you need. So those three things I think you need to be given. An example of time, Princess of Wales, Glasgow. Okay? Headers here. So Princess of Wales, absolute stars. Yet just opened last year, about 6 months open now, £22.5 million build. They launched it 8.5 years ago with a £15 million price tag on it. And they've been through various iterations of staff, and Heather, who's here, has been constant through the team all the way through. And it was, and you would talk to Heather and they would admit, yeah, we did everything wrong. We launched it, and we had a big thing, and we didn't do the planning stage, etc. And it's just taken forever. Luckily, they were building on a brand new site, which meant they could just crack on and carry on delivering hospice care on an existing site, until which point they could move, and then they sell the old site. If you've got a plan that requires you off-siting your IPU, for example, and then knocking down, rebuilding, refurbishing, moving back in again, you've got time pressures, because that's cost, because you're having to pay for that location. So you need to know that. I'm yet to be at Glasgow. I keep promising to go up and see it.
So how long did you say it took them?
8.5 years.
8.5.
Glasgow, just on that case study, Glasgow, absolutely fantastic. What I loved about them was the fact they just kept their head down, they kept going, they kept the momentum up on a capital appeal for 8.5 years. It was that's a slog, that really is. My favourite bit was that they had a fundraising committee, we'll talk about this later. They had a fundraising committee in Glasgow. They had a second fundraising committee in London, for all those Glaswegians moved down to the city, making a pilot, etc. They did £1 million from London. They had a third one in New York. So they went and had a fundraising committee in New York, and they raised substantial 6 figures in New York as well. Because again, it's bringing that money back home. It's, you know, local boys make good, right, I'm going to put that money back in again. Because even though he or she might be over in New York, mum and dad are back in Glasgow. I'm going to make sure I put the money back in there. It's absolutely fantastic the way they did that. Next one.
Might have to go to New York though for a bit of scoping.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think we all need to go to New York for a capital government. So the first thing, okay, so bring it down in terms of fundraising, yeah? So the fundraising review, for example, that we're working on with St Barnabas linked right at the moment, this is exactly what we're doing. We're at the start of this process now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to review. We're going to ask the question, who have you got already? Who do you know? How much money you've already got? And we're going to break that down into the key audiences. We're going to look at trusts, and we're going to have a list of trusts. Who have you got? What have you done? Where's the evidence? Where's the history? We're going to do the same for corporates, we're going to do the same for individual giving, for major donors, and we're going to look at community groups as well. And we'll create a hierarchy from there. So we will understand, and that's from the whole history of time, because again, time in the, if you've got this kind of, we don't only speak to people in the last 3 or 5 years, etc., rules don't apply for capital fundraising, because you're doing something that is unique, generational. Once in a 50-year opportunity, therefore there are no rules about how far back you can go and speak to people, as long as your privacy policy allows you. So in terms of reviewing, we would do the review of individuals, the review of corporates, the review of trusts, the review of community, build those hierarchies, and then that gives us a starting point. And then there is an understanding of, okay, that's what we've got, and that's your current revenue. And the example for that one, St Peter's Bristol. Okay, get one of you. St Peter's and Bristol, they knocked down their IPU and rebuilt it. So they knocked down their IPU, relocated off-site for 18 months, built a new one, brought everyone back in again. And it was £1.5 million. It went over time and over budget. It was only kind of £1.5 million project, but it went over time and over budget, as they always do. However, it was fine, it was managed, it was done really, really well. We didn't get involved in any of that. We just did the public element of the campaign. One thing they did do was they found the book of donors who had given 20 years ago when they built the original IPU. And we asked the question, because we were right in the middle of GDPR and legitimate interest and all that business, and right, is it legitimate to go and write to people who gave 20 years ago to build the IPU, even though a lot of them never touched the hospice since? Is it legitimate to communicate with those people? And we said, well, just about to knock down the thing they helped to build, so pretty much is legitimate, even just to say, look, what we're doing. So there was a communication campaign to go out and say, 20 years ago, you helped us to build our inpatient unit. We're now bulldozing that, but there's a reason, and we'd like to tell you about it. And there was a huge re-engagement opportunity, and a lot of those people came back on as supporters. The other thing about St Peter's, pointing out with this slide, one of the things that, it's a small thing, but it's such a pain when you get to the public-facing stuff, when you actually want to go out and tell the world about your project, if you don't have decent images that show what you're trying to achieve. This is beautiful. This is a full-on, high-res, fully rendered image of the inside of what the new hospice IPU room is going to look like. We've got a little plant in there, there's a bed, there's the doorway. You can see there's a seamless floor with a sliding door, which you can see the folding door. There's some lovely flowers in the foreground. The sunshine is dappling through the trees. It's a beautiful image of what this is going to look like. Trying to get high quality images out of architects is an absolute nightmare, and the reason for that is because their CAD costs are extra costs, so they won't have budgeted for those in their bid. So when you are appointing architects, can you please make a point of including in your contract that you require a range of full high-res images for publicity and communications usage as part of their pitch.
And
because
a video fly-through.
And a video fly-through if you possibly can, because it depends how they build it. If they actually build it, they can build the model. Because we used to have physical models, didn't we? But then actually you build the physical model virtually, and then you can position a camera anywhere and pretty much fly around it. So we did that in St Barnabas 2008. We had this kind of little sort of zooming in kind of thing going on. It's just so much easier to do that. But you've got to think about it up front, and it's got to be built into the contract. So we've reviewed, we know who we've got. Right, next one, opportunity. So again, you've got to back to those income sources. So trusts. I'm going to pick on here, there you go, because we talked about this. Right, so we know we've got our list of trusts. Who else can we go to? So there will be some obvious names. There will be some big names in the trust world that might not touch you for revenue, or might only be interested in a small little grant for revenue. But actually, when we're talking about capital stuff, they're up for a bigger relationship, or they might only be interested in a relationship about capital. So we would want to make sure, and this is what you have to make sure, have you covered all that? Have you done the research? Do you know who the opportunities are? Okay, and I'll give you an example of that in a sec. When you're going through corporates, again, exactly the same exercise. So when we did the feasibility study for Thames, one of the reasons we were confident in being able to say you can go for more is we looked at all the trusts they had and all the corporate relationships they had, and actually, they're in the Thames corridor. They really didn't have that many at all. They were a community and events fundraising hospice, as many of us are. Didn't really do the corporate trust thing. Actually, there was masses of opportunity there to be able to go out, and they have been very successful in that. So we were able to say, okay, there is an enormous opportunity in these areas for development and growth for you. But it's only once that research into what the possible opportunities might be has been done that you can then make a sensible decision about, okay, what level of confidence we want to have in that. For individuals as well. So you've got, every single one of you, I guarantee you, on your database, you've got millionaires right now, and you've faintest idea who they are. And the challenge for us is, we'd really like to know who they are, but in order to do that, you've got to do prospect research, and if your privacy policy does not enable you, and GDPR to do prospect research, then you're not allowed to do that. So does anyone know, just out of interest, how many of you know that your communications and privacy policy allow you to engage in wealth research? I know you do. Tracy, you do as well. It's surprising. So if, I'm just saying hypothetically, if you were thinking about getting involved in that kind of capital appeal fundraising activity in the next couple of years, then it might be a really good idea to go and look at your privacy policy now. And if it doesn't explicitly allow wealth research, you might want to change your privacy policy so that it does do that, and then make sure you've communicated to your donor base that you have a new privacy policy and please go and see it, so that then if you can engage, etc., etc., etc. Okay? It's really, really got to be careful, and you've really got to make sure that you're watertight on that. And IOF and fundraising regulator can give you advice on that.
Well,
And the reason,
sorry.
yeah, go.
What do you, forgive me for my naivety, but wealth research, what would you do?
Okay, so there are agencies that exist to go and find rich people. So, for example, I'll give you the example. That's Emily, who's one of the staff nurses working in Zambia, and that's her during the public campaign. We did basically a guided tour, but with selfies, and then that went out as part of the comms, went out as part of an appeal as well, saying, look, we're halfway through the build, and here she is standing in, this is going to be the day hospice behind me, and here's what we're going to do, so she's talking about all the stuff she's doing, etc. However, working in Zambia, we went and did the research. We looked into the database, and we found 2 individuals, and we worked with, I think it was Prospecting Gold in that case. Prospecting Gold, the factory, FR&C used to be in business, they've stopped doing it recently. So there's the agencies, and all they do is they collate information on wealth in the UK. Anything that's published is basically just brought into one place. And the more money you give them, the more information they can give you about an individual. So for us, we went and researched the database, and they came back and said, aha, you've got some really, really rich people here. And 2 of the people, the first one was the daughter of Lord Stinking Rich. And Lord Stinking Rich had died 2 years ago and just left his daughter £440 million in his will. And she just received that a few months beforehand. And she was on the database as an in memoriam donor. She'd given £25 and then £50 about 3 years ago. That's it, that's the relation. So, there was an approach made, and the approach in that case, we'll cover recognition in a short while, the approach in that case was, this is a £10 million project. If you give us all the money, we'll rename the hospice after Lord Singh, will become Stinking Rich Hospice. And that was turned down because she'd already made a very similar commitment to an art gallery and said, however, exactly what I was after, that's exactly the kind of thing I wanted, but the time was just wrong. But we only knew that she existed through research and found out. The second individual for this hospice that we found was the guy that had moved into the area 3 years ago from California, and he happened to be the vice chair of pretty much every Irish bank and insurance company. He'd also chaired a major capital appeal project for CAFOD. He'd made a couple of £100 donations to the hospice, but nothing, had no relationship with the area. But we sat down, went and sat down and talked to him and explained the situation that this organisation had no history of major donors, and we'd never done a capital appeal before. And basically he said, look, there's a guy, and we all knew there was a guy that we wanted to chair the fundraising committee. And he said, go and get him, but if he says no, I'll do it for you. And so we went after the guy, and the guy went, I'll support you, but I'm not getting involved because I don't have time. So we came back, and this guy signed up and walked in the door with a six-figure check, because that's what you do. Particularly in American philanthropy, you walk in, you do the thing first thing you ask for. He led the fundraising committee. But again, we found him because of Wealth Research, that's it. And it's just a statistical exercise. The other thing for working in Sambir was that we found Bradbury's. Anyone had money from Bradbury? Bradbury Foundation, yeah? So we found Bradbury. They are like the Scarlet Pimpernel, aren't they? You've got to try and find them. They're based in Hong Kong. They like a capital project. They came in, and I think it was 325,000 they gave to that project. But they like a naming. They like a name on it. They'll only give you money if you put a name on it. And so they got the wellbeing centre as part of that hospice.
Can you not do the wealth searches yourself? Does it take a lot of expertise? It sounds like there's a lot of background to.
But the challenge is, where would you start? The challenge is so in terms of individuals, for trusts and foundations, yes, you've got Trust Finder, you've got the resources, you can go and say, right, let me identify who's going to be interested in health, age, regional, locality, etc. For individuals, where do you start? So there is a good starting point. There's an existing bank of knowledge list already. If you are allowed through your conditions to actually go and access that, they will go, aha, you've got Fred Smith. Fred Smith is a philanthropist. Next one, time we're doing. Resource. Biggie. If you are being asked to double your income for the next couple of years, or to bring in a further 50% of your revenue target on top of that and bring it in for capital, you're going to need to resource for that. You are going to need the staff and the bodies in place to enable you to do that. So, unless you are a psychopathic fundraiser who refuses to have any personal spare time whatsoever, if that's the case, then maybe you don't. But actually, in the normal of things, you need to give it the time. Again, in terms of guaranteeing success, one of the conversations that we have with hospices that we work with is saying, right, how you resource this? Who are the people? Because capital bill fundraising, it's just often a relation exercise. You have a large number of clients, of customers, and it's about customer management. Are they happy? Are you giving them the information they want and the time they want it? Are you schmoozing them properly? Are you saying thank you? Are you inviting them to meet people? There's a lot of admin involved in that. But they're going to expect to see people at their level. So if you're asking someone for 100 grand, they're not going to be interested in seeing me. They're going to be interested in seeing the chief exec or the chair of the board of trustees. And that needs time, and that needs management, and that needs account management. So there is a resourcing issue. So one of the questions that we ask is, have you made sure that you funded the fundraising? And the classic, again, how long was a piece of string? Classically, somewhere between 10 and 15% is the kind of range that we would give. Depends on the project, depends on the resource. But something between 10 and 15%, and that covers not just the people, but also the outputs. So you're going to need, okay, if you've got a big project, you're going to need a case of support. You're going to need a document that says this is what we're doing, when we're doing it, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, etc., etc. And that's going to look good, read well, be nicely designed, because it's the kind of thing you want to put in front of someone just before you ask them for 100 grand, or you just ask them for 100 grand and I'll take that pin. But you need that to represent you and the arguments you're making. You need that to be cogent, you need it to be logical, you need to put a full business plan in there as well. So have you got the resource in terms of people, have you got the resource in terms of money to be able to achieve this goal? Okay. Hospice X, that looks like hospice, doesn't it? But it's Hospice X in fact. Hospice X. The chief executive of Hospice X decided to build a new hospice and told the trustees that we're going to build a new hospice and it's all going to be great. Brilliant to the trustees, that sounds good. Like that. The chief executive of Hospice X went to the local paper and said, we have a vision for the future of care. Fantastic. We currently have a 10-bed hospice, we're going to build a 20-bed hospice. And it's going to be magnificent. And, thanks to the generosity of local people over many years, we've got all the money we need. We're just going to go and build it. And it's going to take 2 years. Brilliant. Fantastic, said everybody. What a wonderful thing. The project did not take 2 years. It did not cost £12 million. It cost nigh on £14.5 million. It completely hemorrhaged all the reserves of that particular charity. And, surprise, surprise, revenue income went down. Because they've just been out going, we got loads of money! That'd be fantastic, yeah? Okay. So that's one way of not doing it. This hospice is now recuperating, and they very nearly went bust, but they didn't. But they're now running something like 14 or 15 beds out of 20 and building it back up again. And it's through the incredible attention and hard work of the team that they've been able to do that. The other Hospice X, to mention at this point, in terms of resourcing, would be the hospice that decided to knock down a bit of its IPU, rebuild it and add bits on. And they brought in a capital fundraising team, and they were brilliant. And they went out and raised loads of money. They raised all the money they wanted to raise, and it's fantastic. It's a beautiful project. And all the capital appeal fundraisers were on fixed term contracts. And so they left, and the revenue team was knackered. They knew nobody, they had no relationships, they found it really, really hard to go and raise money because they hadn't been involved in that. And there are a number of organisations, hospital organisations, that this has happened, where there is a capital appeal team and a revenue team. And I've even seen instances where both teams are applying to the same trust at the same time, one for capital, one for revenue. Please. Now I don't mind, I get it that we want to have, we've got, understand we've got a certain amount of pot to raise here on capital, and I get the fact, I really get, and we'll talk about this in a sec, I get the fact that there's pressure therefore on maintaining revenue while you're raising the capital as well. I get that, we've got to keep running the thing while we're building the new thing, I get that. However, the separation of those two functions, in my personal view, is a mistake. We are one big happy family, or one team, we have one goal and objective, which is the future of hospice care for our community. Let's work together to achieve that singular goal, in my view. Penultimate one, phasing. Again, go back to Glasgow. They launched their capital appeal with a public proclamation called the Buy a Brick Appeal, and we're going to raise 15 million quid. And it just went nowhere for 2 years because they hadn't done any research, they hadn't done anything. So the phasing is the 3 Ps. So planning, and that's the stuff we've just been talking about, yeah? Vision, resources, timing, costs. Have we got the case support? Have we identified our audiences? Do we know? So, what we're doing, we know how much it's going to cost, we know when we're doing it, we've got all of our key audiences identified, we've done the research, we're ready to go. Brilliant. That's the planning stage. That's going to take, in answering your time, sorry, name who in the fetching teal shirt, you asked about timing. So planning, it depends how, on resourcing and timing, but you've got to get that stuff done, in my view. You can still go and have informal conversations with key individuals and great and the good, but really, you've got to get your stuff ready. And that will take time. So this project that Naomi and I have been working on, we met them 18 months ago. It's £600,000 to build a new supported housing project for young disabled adults. Out of the total project cost is 1.8 million, they only need to raise 600,000. But they've never done a fundraiser, they've never fundraised before ever, this charity. They've always just existed on their core contracts. So it's a brand new exercise for us. It's taken us 18 months to get to the point where we're now ready to go and raise 600,000. And bizarrely, the very first meeting we had with them, to be like, yeah, well, this guy said he'll give 100,000, and this one said she'll give 106,000. Is that good? And we're like, yeah, it's good. But they weren't ready to have that conversation until we'd done the planning stuff with them, to be able to get to that. So planning first. Second, private. You go private. You go and talk to the great and the good, the high net worth individuals, the people, the movers and shakers and the influencers. And in a perfect world, you would go and get 75 to 80% of your entire cost either given or firmly pledged before you go anywhere near the final phase, which is the public phase. And there is a, my colleague Andrew has a nice little phrasing which says, if you ask for money, you get advice, but if you ask for advice, you get money. And it's really true in capital stuff. So for all the projects that we work on, the first conversations we want to have are not going out to whoever it is, whether it be a trustee, corporate, head of, individual. We don't want to go and ask for money. We do not want to do that. What we want to do is go and say, this is the vision we've got, what do you think? Is this something you could sign up to? What do you think about this? Are we going in the right direction? We care for people. We don't do multi-million-pound projects. What do you think about this opportunity? Allow people to engage, to take a sense of ownership in that. Only once we have created those relationships do we actually want to go out and say, can we have some money? Because if we just go and speak to Fred right off, picking on you, Abby, goes to Abby and go, right, okay, hello there, hospice, brilliant hospice, fantastic project, etc., costing money. And we're looking at you going, okay, great, but what? Actually, if I've already had a conversation with Abby about why we want to do this, the need for the community, how we're going to get there, the passion, etc. By the time we get to the point, right, we're ready to go now, and here's the thing, and which bits we have. Oh, and by the way, I've got my price list, and here's what each room's going to cost, and here's the stuff, etc. I'm much more likely to get a positive feedback. Happy. And the examples I'm going to give here. So, some Richards. Richards. You're supposed to go woo with that. So some Richards, so I'm going to see if I get this right off the top of my head and correct me wrong. So total project 5.3 million, started with a legacy of 2 and a bit.
No, I
Oh.
don't forget we've done all of our scoping. We knew what the costs were. We were in the middle of the scoping and we knew what we could get from trust when that gift arrived.
Then that's right, okay, yes, you're quite right.
So
But
it meant that we could start and finish in 2020, and we were originally planning to start the project in 2020, but because of the gift, we just were able to shift the time set.
But the process and structure has been exactly that. There was the planning, there was the thinking, there was the scoping, identifying, and then going out with the major stuff. And then we've come in at the back end and done the group pictures. So what you've got here is you're looking top down on their existing, there's an internal garden, and there's going to be a roof put on that. And these are all the rooms going around. So you can see as part of the public phase, we're just talking about, oh, it's got a studio therapy room, casting room, music and cinema room. I love this is going to be it. So this central area here is going to be kind of a little cafe, meeting room, gathering area. So one of the rooms is going to be a music and cinema room. There's going to be a screen on that wall there. These walls open up completely like that. So all these chairs and attendants, they're going to have cinema nights in the middle of the hospice. It's a really lovely project, but the point is that all that information in terms of why you're doing it, how you're doing it, all the questions that we wanted to ask of a project, and we walked in and spoke to Trish, have already been answered, already been done. The cost was solid, the project was solid, and there was enough time to do it as well, because 2020 was entirely reasonable. And that was a 5.3 million build. That was entirely reasonable. And now it's about getting into the final year and going back through and going and refreshing those phases and saying, right, how do we do it again? Recognition. Have you got a recognition policy at your hospice? So, working in Zambia, we had to get the agreement of the trustees that if we went and pitched to Lord Stinky Rich's daughter, changing the name of the hospice, can we have that agreed? We have to sign it off. One of the challenges here is some people, like Bradbury, want a name on the stuff. If you don't have a recognition policy that says this is when we do and do not give recognition to funders, then how do you make decisions? So it's really important as part of capital to make your rules before you start. What are you going to do? If someone walked in and said, actually, I want $1 million, I'll give you £1 million, but I want you to rename the Wellbeing Centre after my mum, would you do it? And it's the kind of situation that does happen sometimes. The example I give here is 2002. Chestnut Tree House Kids Hospice in Sussex was being built, and a local guy, from Guernsey, he was not local at all, from Guernsey, another guy, and he wanted to make a gift to a children's charity. He couldn't find anything in Guernsey, and Coots, who are his bankers, and Coots have their philanthropic giving department. And if you're building a hospice, you need to go and talk to them because there's something that PA supports not and support. So Coots got in touch with the Children's Hospice and said, we've got this guy who wants to support something, we've seen you building a hospice, he wants to put some money in, but he wants a plaque with his mum's name over something. And the trustees went, yeah, I'm really sorry, but we do have a no plaques policy. And the bank went, that's a shame, he's going to give you 800 grand. And they went, where do you want the plaque? And it's now there, still over the door of the swimming pool, or the hydrotherapy pool. But they created problems because a family of a little girl that died there raised some money, and one of them came and planted a tree and put a plaque there, and everyone else went, oh, we want to do that to one. So it was like, well, you have to have rules that says this. Okay, so you have to understand what are the rules. And also, who for? So the examples, what examples do you talk about? Recognition. Ah, yeah, the pool. So, yeah. Talk about working in Zambia. The two examples here. Not hospices. Nothing to do with us. So the first one on the left is Mary Rose. So we've been to the historic docks at Portsmouth. You can go and see the ruins of Mary Rose. I think it's a fantastic building where all the timbers is kept in humid conditions, etc. Anyway, they have recognition. You can support Mary Rose. And the way they've done it is they built a virtual Mary Rose, in one of these CAD models. Yeah. So there's the original ship is built, and every plank of wood on the ship has got someone's name on it. Yeah. And the camera just kind of randomly floats around the ship and flies around and swoops and zooms, etc., etc. However, if you go to the keyboard in reception and you type in your name, it'll go and it will zoom into your name. There you go, there's your name. And then it kind of backs out again, and then it kind of floats and swoops, etc., etc. So it costs nothing. Bit of the development time, I think they got it for free in fact. But anyway, it costs a big development time. But the great thing about it is it's an infinite resource because you can always add more to it, and it's virtual. It takes up no space whatsoever, and it's quite cool as well. So I quite like that. The other one, anyone recognise that? No, Bristol Children's Hospital. We had nothing to do with this, but I really, really like it because that was when they built the hospital. That thing there, all these circles, there's you can't just see it, but in here, this is on this wall here, there's a bank of buttons inside there. So the kids, and it was the sicker kids on the upper floors, had coloured buttons just inside the window ledge, and they could come out and press the orange button, and the orange hoop would light up, and then it would just slowly turn around. So the kids could control the sculpture that was outside the window from there. It broke about a week after it was installed, and it's never worked since about 15 years ago. However, inside the foyer, and I couldn't find a picture of it, inside the foyer of Bristol Children's Hospital is a piece of artwork, and what it is these big perspex tubes, right up, and each one's a different colour, and again there's a different coloured button that you push. So the kids come in, and when people are checking in, etc., it's a big thing, and you push the button, push the purple button, the purple tube lights up, and bubbles go up the top there. But inside all of the tubes, on acetate, are the names of every single individual or organisation that supported that hospital. Irrespective of whether they go £1 or £1 million, they're all there in alphabetical order. So you can go and find yourself, and you are being thanked by a piece of art that's in the reception that's also a toy for the kids to play with. And I love that because we don't just have to have a bloody great wooden plaque on a wall. We can use art. Hospices, we need things to make the environment comfortable and beautiful. We can use those as opportunities to say thank you. We can dedicate individual things to individuals. Right, last one. I know. Last one. Prime Minister. The future. You get one opportunity to get end-of-life care right for your patients and their families. You get one chance to get a capital appeal right. And the capital appeal is not only an opportunity to raise money for the thing, it is also an opportunity for you to generate a new level of awareness, support, activity that will push you forward into revenue fundraising if you do it right. And that's the evidence that we've seen over the last 12 years, that if you have this collaborative, collegiate approach where it's not capital over here and revenue over here, where we're working as one team, a build is the strongest fundraising proposition you're ever going to have, apart from the roof blowing off, apart from a disaster, or burning down or whatever. building the brand new shiny thing to look after you and your loved ones is the best fundraising proposition you're ever going to have. And there is a challenge to that, in raising money for the new sexy shiny thing, that makes raising money for the thing you do every day a bit tougher. And therein lies a challenge as part of your planning for finance. And some of the conversations that we've had, for example, is if you know that you can raise £1 million for revenue, but you can raise £1.5 million if you restrict it for capital, but you can only raise £500,000 for revenue by doing that, what are you going to do? Are you going to turn down the 1.5 to keep the 1 that you need for revenue? Or actually going to think, okay, let's accept that there will be a drop, a likely drop through the duration of the capital appeal. We're probably going to see less money coming in. A lot of that core income is still going to arrive. Legacy is still going to arrive. Your event stuff, a lot of IMO giving, etc. That will all just turn up. But the kind of community, particularly, that kind of community activity. So if I know, for example, the Rotarians, you've got the Rotary Club, right? And they do £1,000 for you every year. You can either go back to them and say another 1,000, or if we're talking about because it's new and special and different and exciting, could you do 3 for us this year because it's different, etc. You don't get your 1, you get 3 for restricted, but you don't get your 1 for revenue. Is that okay? You're going to do that? And that's often, from my frustration, is seeing organisations where they go, no, we're not going to do that. You can't go and ask that. That's a revenue relationship. We're going to raise our £1,000 because that's it. And even where fundraisers have got their income lines and you've got your sword of Damocles hanging over your head saying you've got to bring in your revenue, by the way, and so you go and get your 1 because that's on your target. That's not on your target. That is. So I'll go and get that 1,000. We've got to deal with this as grown-ups and talk to S&T and trustees about this. So what our advice is, for example, if there's a contribution from reserves going into the capital appeal, rather than the contribution from reserves going into capital, how about the contribution from reserves going in to support the drop in revenue, which allows you guys to go out and do all the fundraising you can based on the capital? You're going to end up with more money in the organisation, and then you can do stuff with it. But if we start to artificially control where we can bring in money and restrict which pots it goes into, we stop ourselves from having the maximum possible relationship. Yeah, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, examples. Last thing. 1 minute, 2 minutes. So I've already talked about the example that this is the one that went out and said, yeah, we got everything. And it was absolutely catastrophic. It was a devastating decision for that organisation. Do not do that. Even if you already have the money. Don't go and tell people you already have the money. Still use the opportunity. If you're building a £15 million hospice and you've got 15 million quid, go and find £1 million that you need, because you need to go and use that opportunity. You've got an opportunity to engage the community with something that's incredible and special and precious. So here's St Barnabas back down in Worthing. St Barnabas, £4.5 million build. Any whoops from St Barnabas? Yeah, there you go, whoop. Right. So 2008, capital starts, £4.5 million capital appeal target from a 14.5 build, turned out to be 16.5 to build, took a year longer than it's supposed to take, always does, okay? However, there was a decision right from the very start that this was going to be an organisation-wide campaign. And therefore, the schmooze was launched, the great and the good were invited in, everyone in the community was invited to come in and find out about this amazing project and be part of this. And there was a huge amount of effort brought into speaking to the great and the good community. And when we went private, for the public phase, there was a 6-element public phase. So in 22 months, there was 6 stages of public, and that was planning permission. There was a planning permission appeal. Woo. We got planning permission. Yay! We're building. Give us some money. Foundations. We're laying foundations. Give us your money. We're building. Give us your money. We're equipping. Give us your money. We're planting the grounds and gardens. Give us your money. And the final one was, we're in, now we've got to run it, give us your regular gift. Okay, so 6 elements to that. Because it was a new build, and there was a privilege to be able to do that, benefit to be able to do that, because it was a new build a mile away, we were able to get 6,500 people round the new building before it opened, and give them the guided tour. And that cemented that organisation. This is something you've helped deliver. Come and celebrate what you've done, what you've achieved. The result of that was, over the next 3 years, a 50% increase in revenue income. So revenue went up 50% from pre-build to post-build. So capital did the big spike that we wanted, but you don't just drop back down to where you were or even go lower. You use the opportunity to have that communication to incentivise and engage your audience, and that gets you increased revenue. Yeah? And the final thing was, 5 years later, we were doing a tour with the other St Barnabas, and Hugh, Chief Exec, said, one thing absolutely fascinating, we're only starting to realise now, it's 5 years, just over 5 years since we opened the new hospice, since all the capital appeal stuff went on, we've seen a massive spike in legacies. We just didn't realise. Massive, massive spike in legacies. And again, so people are responding to that proposition, they're not doing it with cash, they're doing it with a legacy decision, which is absolutely enormous. Right, I am bang on time. Any questions? I don't know what that means. Slips. Yes, if you could fill in your slips and let us know if you want to be on the main list, that'd be great. Questions, please. You've got time for a couple. Yes?
Quick question. Have you had any success working with developers? So where they want the land that you're currently on and put in some money for the new...
It is difficult. There is a hospice that basically they're building a brand new town, and they've been told they have to build infrastructure as part of that, and they've offered to build hospice, but what they're offering is a box, is a vanilla hospice. And we've had the conversation, well, can we go back and talk to them about actually doubling the cost of it, building a brand new hospice, but keeping their half of the... They're not interested in doing it, because it's all about their bottom line. So, it is possible. However, they are a business that's interested in making profit, and often the only reason they're interested in building, community infrastructure is because that's part of the planning permission. And we've seen time after time, Persimmon are particularly guilty of this, that they go in and go, yeah, we'll build that, and we'll build all this, and we'll build a school, etc., and then they get a year and a half to project, go, yeah, actually, we just can't afford to do that, and we'll just have to walk away from that. And so they ratchet down and down and down their commitment. So it's much better to have be in control of your own destiny. Again, quite often, if you've got one particular hospice, they've got various sites. If they build a brand new hospice, they've got 2 sites they could sell and then raise money for the new hospice. So actually the money isn't that different. If you start thinking about what's the sale cost of what you've already got, what's the planning cost, and also brand new sexy thing is a sexy fundraising capital proposition, then refurb the old thing. You start putting that together. But for me, if you're in that situation, for example, that's exactly the option A, option B I would want to take out to my great and good and go, guys, what do you think? This is cheaper, more affordable, but it's what we've got. This is brand spanking new and fantastic, but a challenge, a risk. Where do you think we should go? And that's the kind of conversation. Tracy, sorry.
I was going to say, how often do you think you can do it? Because obviously you're saying it's a once in a lifetime, but it never is.
No.
I've been at St John's Farm too long to be a once in a lifetime. It's been around the day. So it's, you go out and, we did our inpatient unit and, we did the whole hospice. And now we want to do something different because obviously the whole day hospice things change, what day hospice is used for. And we've got an opportunity on the site as well. That was 18 years ago. Do you think that just doesn't matter anymore?
I think 18 years ago, no, I don't think it matters anymore. I think there is a statute of limitations on this stuff. One of the challenges with one of the hospitals we're talking to at the moment is the thing that they're knocking down was built 10 years ago. And therefore, so part of that is about trust and responsibility. Well, hang on a minute. 10 years ago, you told me this was the thing we need, blah, 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 blah. And now you're going, oh, actually, no, we're going to do something else. So 18 years, St Peter's was 21 years. Complete new, knock down the IPU, new IPU, because it's changed. It's a generation. Hospice care has changed dramatically in those 5 years, let alone 21. So for me, no, 18 I don't think is an issue.
So there is a case for our day services, but it does look beautiful as it is.
So did ours, to be fair.
Yeah.
So we've it's 12 years since we built a new hospice, and now we're building on and extending the building thing. And actually, the redevelopment cost at 5.3 million is as much as the original hospice cost. We've done 2 builds since, but not gone out publicly because we've had the money to be able to do that in some Department of Health grants. But for us, the timing after 12 years has been absolutely perfect because there were many people that engaged with the capital appeal. I haven't done much on the revenue side, and that's not through want of trying, but they're really ready and thirsty to give again. And it was my concern that they'd say, well, it's beautiful and what we wanted, so why, But it's because it's such a different concept, and as long as your case for support is really tight, we've actually found it easier than we perceived they would, because we weren't quite sure that they would understand the concepts of well-being and a living well centre when you're at sort of end-of-life care. But they've actually knew more about it, to be honest, than I thought. It's quite a buzz thing out there, and trust. I wouldn't say it's been a breeze, but it's.
I think ultimately it comes down to the narrative we've got is we're trying to provide when someone you love or someone you know needs end-of-life care, we'd like to be able to have the facilities and the staff and the resources in place to give them the best end-of-life care possible. And that's the ambition. And all you're trying to do is achieve that within a deliverable budget and do that reasonably. Again, you go to communities and say, actually, things have changed now. And again, things have changed usually in the last 3-5 years, haven't they, in terms of clinical care, complexities of IPU care, etc. Actually,
just a quick one. One of the things that we did 18 years ago is we had an artist's impression, so a painting.
Yeah.
And we've used that so many times, it's got our money back because we print it on paper that makes it look real, that makes it look like it is. We sent one to every single person who'd given to the capital appeal and asked them to sign up to a regular gift, and we got a really high percentage of saying you can this is what it looks like.
Guys, if anyone wants to talk about this, we're around for the rest of the day and we're actually tomorrow. You've got contact details, get in touch with us. I'm just going to finish up again with one thought before we go. I hope that was helpful, by the way, but there are a number of times when our experience as a fundraising agency supporting hospice fundraisers is that we meet the fundraiser and they've been, I've been told to go and raise 5 million quid for this thing, and I'm not really sure the details. As fundraisers, I believe that our responsibility, just as clinicians have the responsibility to go back and say, this is what I need for my patients, we have a responsibility as fundraisers to go and say, I want to achieve the thing that you want, I want to achieve success, but I have to have what I need to succeed just as you do. That, I hope, gives you a starting point in terms of structuring that. Okay. Go, be back. Good to see you.